Hey fam, Daniel here. Welcome back to Whole True Apologetics, where we seek answers to tough questions. The question today is, hasn't the Bible been corrupted over the centuries? Hasn't the Bible been corrupted over the centuries? Skeptics like Bart Ehrman and many others will bring this up. They'll say the Bible has been corrupted by people over the centuries, so that what we have today is nothing like what was supposedly written then. Now, is that true? Is the Bible totally corrupt so that we shouldn't trust it? Well, I'm going to give you two lines of evidences that show you that the Bible is not corrupted and that you can trust it. The first line of evidence is the early manuscripts. The early manuscripts. Now, when you're looking at historical documents, you want to look at how early of manuscripts do we have? How early of manuscripts do we have? Meaning, how early of writings do we have that record the actual event that took place? What is the time gap between the event and the writings? What is the time gap between the event and the writings? That's important, because if the time gap is large, all right, like you say hundreds and thousands, like thousands of years or whatnot, then it's possible to have corruption come in. But if the time gap is small, very small, then it's very difficult for corruption to find its way in. All right, now let me give you a quick picture some historical documents and see kind of a framework of how this works. Plato, who is someone that you would read if you in any kind of college course, you'd read Plato. Now, the time gap between Plato and the copies that we have of his writing is about 1,300 years, 1,300 years. The Tacitus, who is someone we get a lot of information about Rome from, the time gap between Tacitus and his earliest writings is about 800 years. Homer's Iliad is about 400 years. And on average, early ancient historical documents, it's about 500-year time gap. Now, this is not to say these aren't trustworthy. It's not to say these aren't trustworthy. These are seen as trustworthy. These are seen as historical. These are actually often not questioned and seen as reliable. Now, I just want that as a framework as we look at the New Testament and the Bible as a whole right now. The New Testament was a time gap between the events or the writings and the copies that we have right now. Well, the time gap is 20 to 40 years. Only 20 to 40 year time gap. The earliest copy we have, earliest copy of manuscript we have, is from the book of John. It's called the John Ryland Papyrus. It was found in Egypt around it dates back to 117 to 130 AD. Now, John wrote his gospel around 95 AD. So the time gap between when John wrote it to when we have the earliest copy is only between 20 and 40 years. Now, that is a tiny time gap, especially when you compare that to ones that we see as historically reliable, like what I just pointed out, like Tacitus or Plato. Now, it's a tiny gap. Now, Michael Kruger, who does a lot of work in this area, he states this: the brief span of time between the production of the New Testament and our earliest copies gives us access to New Testament texts at a remarkable early stage, making it very unlikely that the textual tradition could have been altered. So he's stating that we have so many copies, but very early copies, making them very reliable and very hard to fit any time where there would be corruption. Additionally, J. Rowland Wallace and many others note this understanding of the chain of custody. We'll look again at the book of John, all right? The chain of custody. The chain of custody states that John didn't just write his gospel in 95 AD, and then 300 years later, some people just found it. Now, no, John wrote it, and there's this chain of custody where it was passed to his disciple, and his disciple, and his disciple, and the document was passed on. John passed it to Ignatius, who then Ignatius passed it to Polycarp, who then passed it to Irenaeus, and so forth. So there's this chain of custody that was continually passed on, that you could trust what they had, what was actually written by John. All this to say, the tiny gap that we have specifically with the New Testament shows that it is very reliable and it has not been corrupted. It has not been corrupted. Now let me take a quick picture at the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament was very meticulously copied over the centuries. Now, from 400 BC to about 500 AD, there's a group called the Sopherim, and they were a group that was responsible for copying down the scriptures of the Old Testament, making copies of it, and they were known as counters, meaning they would literally count the number of letters, the number of words on each of the pages they're copying, so that the scripture would remain pure and protected and not corrupted. They're known as the counters. After them were these people called the Massoretes, and they're from 500 AD to about 900 AD. And they're a group, and they were known for how meticulous they were also. And let me just read you a quick quote by this guy named Sir Frederick Kenyon. This is his book right here on our Bible and the ancient manuscripts. Sorry, why I couldn't read that, I don't know. He states this: the Massoretes numbered the verses, words, and letters of every book. They calculated the middle word and the middle letter of each. They numbered the verses which contained all the letters of the alphabet, or a certain number of them. And so basically, it just goes on and on and on how they took such painstaking to make sure the text was preserved. They went to extreme lengths to make sure that the text was preserved. Now, let me just give you one practical example. The Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, which is an incredible discovery. And inside of them, there was tons of scrolls, and there was Old Testament scrolls. And these one specific Old Testament scroll, the Book of Isaiah, which they had all the Book of Isaiah, dated all the way back to 400 BC. 400 BC. And when they compared that to what they had then, guess what? It hadn't changed. It remained the same. That gave evidence. That evidence pointed to reliability of the text and the fact that it hadn't been corrupted over the years. The second line of evidence I want to point out quickly is the number of manuscripts we have. Not only are they early, but we have a lot of manuscripts of the Old and New Testament. Now, many were like, do we have just one? Do we have just 5? Do we have just 20? No, we have a lot more, a lot more. The reason why that's important is because the more you have, the more you're able to see what was actually written. You're able to compile and see across the board all that was written and see, hey, okay, this is what the text said. This is what the original text said. Now let me just give you another picture again through the historical documents. Plato, we have about 219 copies. Tacitus, about 31. Homer's Iliad, about 2,300. That's how many copies we have of those to be able to compile and see what was actually written. Now, if we turn to the New Testament, what do we have? The New Testament, just written in Greek, we have about 5,757 copies. Now, if you add also written in Aramaic, Latin, and other language, we have about 24,000 copies. That is a ton of copies. A ton of copies. Why is that important? Because we have so many different copies from different countries and different languages and during different time frames. And we could see if none of these agreed or they contradicted each other, then we would question the Bible. But the fact is, they don't. They agree across board. And Michael Gruger, again, he states, we have 3 times more New Testament manuscripts within the first 200 years than the average Greco-Roman author had in 2,000 years. Dan Wallace, another person, stated this: if the average size manuscript were 2.5 inches thick, all the copies of the works on an average Greek author would stack about 4 feet, while the copies of the New Testament would stack up to over a mile high. This is indeed an embarrassment of riches. Now, what have we seen so far? What I want to briefly show you is these 2 lines of evidences, the fact that we have very early manuscripts and the fact that we have tons of manuscripts, give evidence to the fact that the Bible has not been corrupted. Now, next week we're going to look at, well, are there variants in the manuscripts? And if there are, do the variants show that it's corrupted and can't be trusted? Well, let's check that out next week. But for now, what we see with these 2 lines of evidence is that the Bible can be trusted and the Bible has not been corrupted. I hope you guys have a good week. I'll see you guys next time. Hey, if you found this video helpful and challenging, I encourage you like, share, and subscribe this video to anybody and everybody you know.